who is deciding what this justice process looks like?
Where do you think Sri Lanka stands in achieving transitional justice?
It's a bit more complex, as we call it a victor's peace, right? When we say truth, there's not one truth. We see it manifesting in different ways. Maybe it's not ethno-political anymore, it is religious intolerance now.
The ability to speak in the language of the other person.
Yeah.
They believe that that is a barrier to achieving reconciliation.
And language has gone from, I think in 2020 it was about 20% or something or less, to now.
Can we then say we've achieved reconciliation?
Within the policy, you should be able to submit it in Tamil. That's okay. They've been asked, you have to submit the documentation in Sinhala. We've noticed how the competition is so much higher to get the same pot of funds. We have to start being creative, I think. We have to start moving away from that mentality of like the donor.
Sri Lanka has, I think, done a little bit of it.
We haven't scratched the surface, I think.
Hi everyone, today I have with me Dr. Natasha Palansuriya. She has a PhD in international politics. She has over a decade of experience in academia and also working in the development space in Sri Lanka. She's also the lead researcher of the Sri Lanka Barometer, something I'm a big fan of and that we might talk about during our conversation. And then she's recently also launched, and she's the executive director of an initiative called the Insights Initiative, which you'll probably also hear a little more about as we move along. Thank you so much for coming today, Natasha. It's
Thanks
such a
for
pleasure to have you.
Yeah, I'm glad to be part of this conversation, for sure.
Thank you. I'm really excited for what we're going to be talking about. I think I'm excited for this conversation because I know you're back in the country after some time, so it's not easy to get a hold of you, and I know that you've been doing a lot.
That's good, for sure, yeah.
Part of quite a few projects, including the Barometer, which is huge work.
Yeah.
So thank you for making the time to be here.
Thanks.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Considering your work in the peace building space in Sri Lanka, especially that we are after a civil war and that this country has been through quite a bit, can you just take me and the audience through imagine if Sri Lanka had this ideal response to the war. All of the post-war processes were amazing, our leaders did fantastically well, and the people achieved reconciliation, and everything was perfect, and we were basically a great case study for the rest of the world. Can you take us through what that might have looked like?
Okay. So I'm actually going to draw from what other countries have done, other post-war countries, but also other countries transitioning from authoritarian governments to democracies. They follow this process called transitional justice after a conflict. So you can't say that it's like everyone did it perfectly, but there is kind of academic literature and theory around what this would look like in an ideal situation. So generally, when we talk about it, there are 4 pillars. And for it to actually, for us to see any impact or any change or healing, I think it's necessary to have these 4 pillars in place.
Okay.
Sri Lanka has tried, a little more about it later. So the 4 pillars, and I'll tell you a little bit about it as well. The first is truth-telling. So that's about acknowledging what happened. Let's take a conflict, for example. A lot of violations happen, a lot of pain and, personal struggles, and people's lives are like in upheaval, the country's in upheaval. So it's about acknowledging what happened and publicly kind of making testimonies or statements. And basically, I think one big thing that people or countries fail to get right is that when we say truth, there's not one truth. Your truth will be different to my truth. And it's acknowledging that there are these multiple truths, and we should be able to kind of bring those together in sort of equilibrium, right? So that's one aspect. And then the second would be justice and accountability. So that will be about actually through a legal process and through courts and tribunals. It depends. Some contexts they'll take a punitive approach where you punish perpetrators for what has happened. Some will take a restorative approach where you would choose the forgiveness path, but you acknowledge, okay, these violations have taken place, and the perpetrators may be forgiven or pardoned. So there are different approaches to justice as well. And then you have reparations, which is more the material side to it. Because you can do all of these things, but people's lives may have been completely kind of toppled around. There might have been displacement and land grabbing issues and loss of livelihoods and all of that. So this is more a difficult process, and from what I've kind of studied, a lot of countries have not been able to get it right as well. It takes a lot of resources to also understand how do you compensate loss like this. Is it through monetary means, or how do you do that? So that's like kind of more the material aspect to it. And then you have the non-recurrence pillar, and that is again might take years and years because it's all about institutional reform or reforming police or military policies being kind of overturned or changed, or new policies coming in to sort of address what happened during a conflict to make sure that it doesn't, occur again.
Okay.
So those are the 4 pillars when we look at transitional justice. And I think an ideal process would have these 4 pillars going kind of parallelly to each other, but that's not always the case, or not always possible because of multiple reasons. But I think when you ask me how would it look like, I would see these things happening in parallel.
Okay. So just for me to run through those 4 again, truth is one, justice and accountability is another, non-recurrence is another, and what was the other?
Reparations.
Reparations.
Yeah.
And would you say that this would have to be implemented entirely by the state? Should the state be leading this effort? Who's responsible for making sure, you said, ideally it should be done simultaneously, right? Who should be responsible?
For sure, the state has to take a leadership role because one thing is it depends on the dynamics of a conflict as well. So say in the South African example, the apartheid regime was overturned and a new government came in. So they took the kind of, it was more straightforward, I think, because it was more about the victims now taking ownership and taking control and saying, okay, this is what needs to happen for healing to take place. I think in our context, it's a bit more complex, as we call it a victor's peace, right?
Okay.
Where still who is deciding what this justice process looks like, and a lot of coming from civil society and also from the families of victims, it looks like the state that had a very big part to play in this, from more of like perpetrator side, it could be argued as well, is now in control. But then the state does have the opportunity to kind of take ownership of that and be like, okay, we know this happened. These things happened during a war or a conflict. And the truth-telling part is that acknowledge it. Yes, we played a part in these two. And now let's move forward and fix it. And how would you like to move forward? So it's a process also of understanding what do communities that were victimized or communities that were affected directly by a conflict, what do they want, how do they see it? But it's very important for the state to play a role because everyone looks up to the state, and if they're not taking ownership, it really has no impact. Also, it will then be kind of more like a community process, which I think it works a lot, and we have a lot of examples in Sri Lanka as well where community-driven like healing processes work, but then it's not wide scale, it's not at a national level, and then kind of moving forward is difficult in a sense. So definitely state plays a part, but also taking, working with civil society, with community-based organizations, religious groups, just kind of coming together to get that support, I think, because we can't expect the state to do everything also. So I think, but definitely the state should be invested and show that, yes, we are driving this process and it can happen. It's like a national process, basically.
Just like the state needs to partner with civil society organizations to move the needle forward, I had needed help to make this podcast a reality. That help came from the company I co-founded with my partner called Lunar Yeti. Lunar Yeti is a personal branding studio and has helped me and several others produce beautiful videos that help build their personal brand online. We help people all the way from ideation to filming to editing, giving them great quality content that is unique to their voice, all so humanity's best ideas can flourish. Today, I am excited to let you know we are expanding into podcasts through our Conversations product. If you are looking to start your own podcast and want it to look and sound great, check the link in the description for more information. You mentioned transitional justice during the beginning of your answer, and you said there's 4 processes that would happen if we were to have an ideal post-war process. So are these 4 processes part of transitional justice? And also, where do you think Sri Lanka stands if we were to have a scale of 1 to 10 in achieving transitional justice in this country, considering the war?
Yeah.
Where do you think Sri Lanka stands?
It's very hard to kind of give a number, I think, like that at the get-go. But I think if we use, for example, as a benchmark, Sri Lanka signed or like ratified the UNHRC, Human Rights Council resolution in 2015 saying we're going to follow this process of transitional justice. These are the mechanisms we're going to put into place. So I think we need to have sort of a benchmark to be like, okay, this is what was committed to, what we do, and where are we now. And I think to give credit where credit is due, the government did try a lot to, they put in place things like Office of National Unity and Reconciliation. They did consultations across the country. I think the Consultation Task Force on Reconciliation Mechanisms has like 2 big volumes of like recommendations and testimonies, and that's also part of truth telling, right? They've collected all these testimonies of this happened. Obviously it's not like widely publicized. People who work in the sector might know it, might have access to it, but it's not like it's a public, it is public, but it's not like something if you're not working in the field, you're going to go look for it and read those testimonies. They did, putting in place things like Office on Missing Persons, Office for Reparations. Those are all part of, the process or the mechanisms of transitional justice. So in terms of putting in place a foundation, I would say we've done something. We can't say we've not done anything. It's just the implementation and taking that forward. And when governments change, their priorities change, the funding is then drained and given to a different area, and this area is forgotten. So I think based on that, I would put it probably on a lower range, maybe below 5, if you have to give a score. But I think there's other ways of measuring, and that's something we do through Sri Lanka Barometer as well. It's bigger than just looking at transitional justice. It's more wider because we're looking at different aspects. We're looking at reconciliation, which is a little different. It goes hand in hand with transitional justice, but it can be different as well. There also we do this measurement on progress of reconciliation, where it's not a bunch of experts sitting at a table and saying, okay, this is this, and we've done it. It's citizens saying, from my experience, from what I've observed, I would say this is where we are on a scale of 1 to 10. And for the past, from 2020, we've measured this, and the score is about a 6, so moderate. So I think there are ways, you can give a number to it, but if you're asking from my opinion in terms of looking at what we've committed to and where we are now, I would probably say below a 5 for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
If it answers your question.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's very indicative of. I was very curious, where do we stand from your perspective? And obviously, it's not a measured number and it's not 100% accurate.
Exactly,
but it's good
yeah.
to know that it's something below 5 right now. Now, considering that we're 16 years post the end of the war.
Yeah.
The war was 26-year long thing, and then it's been 16 years, so that's almost 2 decades now.
Yeah.
Do you think we're in the right space to go to the state or to tell the country in general
Yeah.
that, hey, our transitional justice process is not looking good. We laid a foundation. There are these 4 areas that need to be looked at, but the best job has not been done. People have still not been able to move on. Do you think that would be received well and that the need for transitional justice is relevant today?
I think, yeah, as long as there are grievances still, as long as there are communities saying we still have unanswered questions, where our loved ones, give us our land back, give us our home back, this like the rightful, what they are entitled to as citizens and what they've lost during this war, as long as those issues are still there, and as long as there is there's still things that are even legally or by law, like policies like Prevention of Terrorism Act is still there. If the war is over, why do we still have that? There are so many things that are like a hangover from the war that we still carried forward to now. And we see recurrence, right? We see it manifesting in different ways. Maybe it's not ethno-political anymore. It is religious intolerance now, or there's a lot of now class-based issues as well, and conflict over resources. And, it just manifests in different ways because we haven't addressed the issues. There's still marginalization. So I think as long as these issues are still there, there's always a need. We have to address. I always use this analogy of a wound, right? You have a wound on your leg, say, for example, and you just don't want to look at it. You just want to cover it and move forward. You don't want to attend to it because it might be painful at the moment to put the medicine you need or whatever. But you cover it and you leave it because you don't see it, right? You're like, okay, let me just move on with my life. But then it's festering under what you've covered, right? And I always take this analogy because that's basically what we're doing now, is we're just covering those issues that we have had, that the root issues of the war. It can be language rights, language-based. It is based on resources or land or missing people or whatever those things. We're like, okay, we're doing okay now. Let's just move on. But then they're going to resurface and it's going to be worse. And I think that's the non-recurrence pillar as well of TJ's transitional justice, is basically you have to attend, you have to heal it before you can actually really move forward. So I think we're still in the space, definitely.
Okay.
And someone once told me peace building is like a lifelong process, right?
Okay.
Maybe in yours and my lifetime, we might not see the things we're fighting for.
Okay.
But we have to keep doing that until we get the answers, get the justice. And also I think now we are in a space also politically that we could speak out about some of these things without having to worry about how it's going to be perceived, or we can openly have conversations about this. I think in that sense we have to use that opportunity, and I see the Argalea also as a critical kind of moment in our history where, yes, it was about a shared struggle over economic issues and not having basic necessities of fuel or electricity. But then people were open to learning about, okay, what happened. Maybe it's like in smaller circles, but even online on Twitter or Facebook, people were saying, okay, what happened during the war? And people were more open to understanding and learning. And I think that itself is an opening that maybe we didn't make the best use of, because now we kind of okay, let's move on. We got our full, and then we kind of moved on from it. But I think in terms of a space and a time, there's never a wrong time. People ask this question. I think someone once asked, it's 15, not someone from Sri Lanka, but it's 15 years after the war. Why are you still talking about it? Why are you still talking about social cohesion? As long as communities are divided, as long as we have these issues, we have to keep talking about it. We have to keep pushing it. We have to keep asking the government to do something about it. Yeah.
Okay. Your example of the allegory you used of the wound, I so relate, because I once cut my foot. And I was so afraid to have a look at it. Like, I was afraid. It was just a tiny cut like this, but
You're like,
blood
I
was
don't want
pouring out.
stitches or
Yeah, so I had to go to the doctor and get an injection and all of that. And to this date, like I told you, Sri, take a picture of the wound because
Yeah.
one day I want to see it. And to this day, I've still not gotten the courage to look at the
it.
picture of the wound
Oh my
because
God.
it is a
Yeah,
cut, right?
exactly.
So
I think that's what we're doing as a country.
considering that I was afraid and I still am afraid to look at what happened to my foot a year ago, and using that allegory to understand how Sri Lankans or the state or societies in general in this country think of the post-conflict processes.
Yeah.
Are we looking at that wound? Like, are we really looking at that wound, or are we just, do we have a photograph that we'll one day approach and we're just never doing it? You know, it makes me think about also another excuse I hear very often that people use to not look at that phone is the excuse of why should we listen to the West? Because UNHRC, the UN, all of these resolutions that every year I think we have to go and present our progress. And I think this is also used quite a bit politically as well, how we should not fall for what the West is expecting us to do.
Foreign influence.
Also
and,
that for, the organizations and the countries that are pressuring us to take measures to progress are also being accused of hypocrisy and double standards, and so why should we listen to them? What are your thoughts on that narrative when we bring up the story about or the requirement for peace and reconciliation in this country?
I really like this question because I also wrote a paper on this once.
Okay.
Kind of like demystifying what is transitional justice. And one of the biggest, not myths, but one of the biggest conceptions or misconceptions we have as a society is that it's a foreign concept. It's interfering in our business. We need to protect our sovereignty. All these things, I think it's valid. One thing is, you know, if we don't know something, if it's an alien concept to us, it's the fear of the unknown, right?
Yeah.
You're like, what is this going to dig up? Like, what is it going to do to us? Like, do we need this? Like, if we are not in the middle of it, we're like, we're okay now. We're peaceful. There are no bombs going off.
Yeah.
We can go to the north and east.
Yeah.
So what's the big problem? Like, you know, that's how people think, right? Which is also, I'm not, you know, blaming people for thinking like that, because perspectives, right? And every perspective counts, I think. It's just that the whole idea that it's Western concept is also being put on, like you said, it's a political rhetoric. It's coming from the media. It's like, you know, let's not do this. But if people really understand what this means, I don't think the general public is going to think that it's, you know, something that we shouldn't do. One thing is, yes, it's a concept that comes from the West, but so many countries, non-Western countries, have used transitional justice in their own way. Like, you take the framework and say, okay, this doesn't work for us. This didn't work in Rwanda, for example. So let's do it differently here. Or this is not what we need. Or like, let's change it a bit. But I feel like if we have the kind of the basis or the foundation of we need to heal, and this is how we need to heal, and we need justice, and this is how we need to do justice, and learn, because we've never done this before. We need to learn from countries that have done it and got it right, or also countries that have done it and not got it right. And we kind of, you know, take what we can and do it our way, I think. And I think there's a lot of conversation because the government in 2020 withdrew from the UNHRC resolution saying, we didn't want this. You know, we're doing our own thing. We're going to do a local mechanical process. That's also, you know, a misconception. Our government in 2015 co-sponsored this resolution. They wrote it together with experts, saying this is what it should look like. Well, people would argue, you know, they sat at the top and decided for the people on the ground. But I mean, people can also argue that they know what the country needs, like they know their constituents. So like, it's also, one thing is, it's not the TJ mechanisms that we inherited is not really for, you know, a foreign concept, because we wrote it together, we co-sponsored it. And that itself, I think, was a big step that we don't give too much credit to, and I think deserves credit, is that we actually, the government at that time actually said, you know what, we'll sit with you, we'll co-sponsor this resolution, and let's do something about this. And the other thing is, I think what people don't understand is we live, and you don't have to understand this because if you're, in your bubble, in your life, you don't really think about this. But we live in a globalized world order where if we want the support of other countries, if we want global trade, we also have to think about the other side of it, human rights. So it's a give and take, right? It's like, okay, I will follow these international standards because I also want to benefit from what the international other countries can give me, whether it's economic or other political or otherwise. So you also have to you want something, you also have to then adhere to these standards, right? Not to say that, just put away all our values, just go with it. Also, I always think if even the withdrawal from the resolution, I think could have been done in a different way, because if I want to be part of the table where decisions are being made about me, I need to sit in that table. I can't step away and be like, okay, you can't talk about me without me at the table, when I actually said I don't want to be part of it. So I think we need to think of it in that way. We have really intelligent people. We have lawyers and diplomats and Sri Lankan people who represented us at various stages who we can, use their knowledge and get them involved and, let's do something about this and let's not try to remove ourselves from it. And also, I think there are things within justice, transitional justice, these concepts of values that are part of our values as well, right? Like, whether it's healing or memorialization, some people argue reconciliation is a very Christian concept.
Okay.
But actually, there are things you take from it. Like if you talk to, I'll bring a personal example here. My husband's Buddhist and I'm Christian. We always talk about religion and, where are the common things or where do we clash or, things like that. And there's so much things in Christianity like forgiveness and, healing and all these things that are also in Buddhism. So I think, we have to just really, think from different perspectives, understand different perspectives. And, whether it's a foreign concept, it's okay. If it's going to help us, it's fine. And then another thing is, I think we also have to be humble enough to say, maybe we don't know everything.
Yeah.
We don't have the resources. Like after a war, how much did our economy suffer? The government has to prioritize certain things over others. And yes, we do need the help of the international community to kind of look at other aspects that maybe we don't have the technical expertise or the resources to do so. So I think, it is a very Western concept, but I don't think it should be looked at something that's detrimental to us. Yeah.
Okay. You were just talking about, like, you and your husband talking about Buddhism and Christianity and how Christianity has all of these notions about forgiveness. And that just reminded me about how just a couple of minutes ago you were talking about the punitive process versus the restorative process, right? What do you think of the receptivity of the Sri Lankan public in general to the restorative process? Because as I understand, and you can correct me here, the restorative process is also about forgiveness, right?
Yeah.
Are we okay with that? Are we open to that? What are your thoughts?
I think what is also interesting is we think that forgiving and forgetting are the same thing. Like it's not just like it's a usual thing, right?
Yeah.
People say forgive and forget.
Yeah.
But also I think to forgive, you need to acknowledge what happened. And if someone can stand in front of, a tribunal and say, yes, I did this to this family, I did this to this community, I was part of this massacre or whatever it is that happened, and people are willing to listen and be like, okay. And then the victims can decide, thanks for acknowledging it. I forgive you. Let's move forward. I mean, this is a very simple example, but this happens, like the South African example. It happened at a national level where publicly there was acknowledgement publicly saying we did this, there was racism, there was this, and we did this to people. And then Mandela was like, we forgive you, and Desmond Tutu, and this idea of like, thank you for acknowledging our pain, we forgive you, let's move forward. There might be instances where countries decide, no, that's not going to work. We need punitive justice. So it could be like some sort of process. It could be a mix of restorative and punitive. So it just depends on what's going to work, and it's very complex. But we need to start by having those conversations. Having at a higher level to really understand like how do we move forward from this, but also give victims what they need as well to be able to move forward. So I think, I don't know how, it's very hard to think. Like I can't even imagine how it might be, but I think, just bringing an example of our current president, he did say in a speech, yes, there was wrong done and we acknowledge it, and now let's try to rebuild. That is like a tiny step in the right direction, I think, in terms of there is some, at a national level, there's some sort of acknowledgement. And I think people are afraid also to acknowledge, because then what's going to happen after that? How are we going to, I think there needs to be processes in place before we come to that point of acknowledging and then deciding, okay, if we acknowledge, what way are we going to take? Is it punitive? Is it restorative? Is it giving amnesty? Is it a mix of everything? I don't know. So I think we are not there yet. We have so much more to do before we even can think of that, I think.
Okay. All right. We've been talking a lot about transitional justice. But in my opinion, I feel like that's a lesser known label than reconciliation. Like people have different notions of what reconciliation is, but it's a very popular word.
Yeah.
Like it's a heard word, unlike transitional justice or restorative justice. Can you explain what the difference between the two are and why both are necessary, or how do they connect with each other?
So I'm telling you this because I used to think of it in a certain way, and now after working more in this area, I have a different view as well.
Okay.
So I used to think that transitional justice is like the vehicle and reconciliation is the destination. So you need to have the process of transitional justice to get to that destination of reconciliation.
Okay.
There's a lot written about that too. But now that I've worked on this so much, I think reconciliation and transitional justice are different, but they also go hand in hand. So if you take transitional justice, it's more like the legal side of it, or the processes, or the mechanisms, the things that need to be done to achieve a certain end. Whereas reconciliation is very much the relationships, the social side of it, rebuilding trust, rebuilding relationships, giving space for communities to heal how they want to heal, like whether it's memorialization or so that I think you need both. And I don't think I disagree with the notion that now that reconciliation is a destination. I think it's an evolving process. And we see it even in our context, where things change, right? Things happen. The war is one thing, but then we have other things come up, like the Easter Sunday attacks, or other religious issues of religious intolerance, or attacks on places of worship, or even now this concept of economic injustice is coming into the conversations of reconciliation. So I think it's a process that's constantly evolving. It's not something we can achieve or we can stand and say, okay, now we have reconciliation. I don't think that's the case. I think it's constantly something we have to be working on. It's about making sure we're closing the gap between communities, making sure that there are no divisions or hate or misunderstanding, all those things. I think that's reconciliation. And then there's justice. There was this saying that without justice, there cannot be reconciliation.
Okay.
But it's not guaranteed. No, I can't remember that quote. Maybe I need my phone for this.
Yeah, sure.
How long have we? Yeah, so it says transitional justice can contribute to reconciliation, but reconciliation is not guaranteed by justice alone. So basically, what we're saying is, yes, if you do all these things for healing, yeah, we can, achieve reconciliation, but reconciliation is not guaranteed by justice alone. So there's so much more that has to happen on the side. So I think it's two concepts or two processes that go kind of hand in hand. And then there was another a scholar who said transitional justice is about coming to terms with the past, while reconciliation is learning to live together. Which I also find it's a very simple way to put it. One thing is you have to acknowledge the past to heal and move forward, and then reconciliation is building the relationships or coming together, learning to live together again, basically. So I hope that answered your question about the difference between the two.
So how I see it is, to achieve reconciliation, which is needed, you need transitional justice, but you also need a lot of other things happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And transitional justice alone won't get you reconciliation.
No.
And you cannot achieve reconciliation if you do not pay attention to
the
transitional
justice also.
Yeah.
It's very complex. But yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Now, we've been talking a little bit about reconciliation and transitional justice. And I don't know if I might be wrong here, which is why I like this space to be one where even an ignorant question is welcome, because that's how you learn.
Yeah.
So I am wondering if we could use this requirement for reconciliation forever. Because if you don't have something to measure the state of reconciliation, could we go on saying we need reconciliation for the next 100 years? You know? Which is why I bring in the question about the barometer.
Yeah.
Can you explain what a reconciliation barometer is?
And
I
how
know
do
you've
we
been
measure
working
it?
on it.
Yeah. So let me start with the barometer itself. Is a tool used in social sciences to kind of understand or measure the pulse of the people. So what are people thinking about specific issues in a country? It doesn't have to be reconciliation related. It can be some kind of like the Afrobarometer focuses a lot on governance and democracy. There's different aspects that different countries might focus on depending on what they need. But the whole idea is measuring public attitudes, experiences, and perceptions over a period of time. So it's longitudinal, so we can measure trends basically. And then that's then used to a lot of contexts use that as like data for policy making. So evidence-based policy making, you can say this is what the country is thinking, these are the numbers, and this is the kind of solutions you might need to do based on that. And then a lot of post-conflict countries are using reconciliation barometers, which is using indicators that are necessary to measure, like you said, reconciliation. There, like the Sri Lanka barometer, which I'll tell you a bit about, we have 62 indicators.
Okay.
But different countries might have their own indicators to measure what's important for their country or their citizens. So how we and was very useful for us, because when you say reconciliation, it's one thing is it's so huge, like it's such a loaded term, but it's also diluted a lot as well at the same time. Because what I say is reconciliation, I could be like, it's about repairing relationships. What does that look like? Or someone could say, for me, reconciliation is about social justice. For me, it's about equality. For me, it's about having a government that knows what I need and responds to it. So it can be different things. So what the Sri Lanka barometer did back in 2018 when it was brought to Sri Lanka, we followed the South African model. They also do the South African reconciliation barometer. They've done it for more than 20 years now. And that's very successful because their government uses that data and relies on that data for decision making. So we brought it to Sri Lanka and said, but this is not going to work for us because their indicators are very different to what we need. So we did consultations around the country in 2018 with communities, with experts to understand what does it mean for Sri Lanka? when we say reconciliation, what is the ideal scenario? So there are 8 thematic areas, or we call it dimensions of reconciliation, that came up from those consultations, which kind of gives us a framework to say, okay, if we have, for example, one is dealing with the past. How important is dealing with the past? How effective are we in dealing with the past? Like the whole aspect of, justice for wartime violations, or justice for other, conflicts, or like wide scale, mass violence or whatever. So that's one, dealing with the past, which also includes maybe memorializing, having the space to memorialize could be one aspect of it. And then the other one is justice for all. So then we're looking more at like the legal side of it, or ability to access justice, or reparations is part of that as well. And then one is accountable governance. People strongly said we need governments to address everyone's needs equally, not prioritize one community over the other. The other one is active citizenship. We need the freedom, we need the space to be active citizens, to hold our government accountable, to vote, make decisions, and, the healthy democracy aspect of it. Then we have equality of opportunity. All communities need to have equal opportunity. It doesn't matter what ethnic background, what religious background, what gender, what region you're from. You have to have the equal right to education, to a standard of living, to all of these things. So it's a lot like that. So there are other aspects also. I won't go into it too much. But that's kind of a framework to measure reconciliation. Even though I said, yeah, it's not a destination as such, it's an evolving process. If we're able to say we're progressing, I think we're going in the right direction.
Okay.
So that's one of our indicators, is the progress of reconciliation. If we can say, okay, if you look at all these indicators and we're seeing an upward trend of, okay, we're doing better, equal, opportunities are getting better. Trust is a big part of it, political trust, and that also links to the institutional reform side of it. Do we have confidence in our institutions, in our political institutions, to act in our best interest? So interesting finding from the sneak preview of the 2025 findings is that since the elections, like we collected data in January and February this year, political trust has gone up. So people have this sense of expectation or hopefulness. Okay, we were able to come together and vote a government, a leftist government for the first time in the history of since independence, I guess, or the history of our country. And that was, people understood the agency they had. They were like, we were the ones who voted this government. It wasn't the same old government. It wasn't a mainstream government. And, it could fluctuate now. Maybe if we ask the same question now, we might have a different response. But, those things are all important to like a healthy democracy, but also to know that everyone is treated equally. There's social justice, there's economic justice. It's like a whole, pot of things, I guess. So yeah, it just depends on what the country needs at the time, and it could change as we go.
Okay. So as I see it, the Sri Lanka Barometer is a tool for understanding the pulse of the people. And how you understand the pulse of the people is through these 62 indicators.
Yeah.
And you score, like you ask everybody you interview those 62
Same.
indicators.
Yeah.
You see what that scoring looks like on a collective.
Yeah.
And then you publish those results every 2 years.
Every 2 years.
And
yeah.
so then now in 2025, we can see the pulse of the people all the way from when you guys in 2018 started.
Yeah, so the first survey was in 2020, and so now we've done 4.
Yeah.
So when you look at, you could see these very interesting trends. And that's very useful. Also regionally, you can say, for example, we have an indicator called the importance of reconciliation institutions. So we ask about, and then we ask about 5 questions to measure that indicator.
Okay.
So we ask how important is the Office on Missing Persons, how important is the Office of Reparations, Human Rights Commission, all these things. And then people kind of rate it. And then we have a score. And it's generally around a 7 usually. But then when you look at a provincial breakdown, you see the north and east is way higher. Like if you see the scale, the north and east is like shooting up, sticking out compared to the other
They're
provinces.
saying it's more important.
It's more important, and we know why. So then we ask, okay, why is the north and east saying this? And then we can tell the government, this is an important thing, for this region.
Yes.
It's also important for the rest of the country, not that the rest of the country is saying it's not. So even though there's this rhetoric of we don't need these things, the people are saying it's important for us to, even dealing with the past, we ask things about memorialization, reparations, truth telling, and people are always saying these are important things. We need this. So we can stand up and say this is not what me, Natasha, as a researcher, is saying. This is a nationally representative sample of Sri Lankans of the adult age who is saying these things are important. We need this. We need to heal. We need to do this. We're not doing well in this part. Maybe we're doing better here. These are like, measurements that we can use to really tailor policy making also. And also change the discourse. We can say, we always find this, and I find it very interesting when we do workshops, we do community discussions, we do workshops with academics or with religious leaders. And I find it very interesting that people can just, stand up and say, no, that's wrong. Like we're showing a findings, and these are what Sri Lankans are saying. They're like, that's wrong, it can't be.
Okay.
So what I always think is we find it very difficult to understand different perspectives, right? It's not about what you, me, and my other friend think. Maybe we think the same, but there's a whole country out there with different experiences, different lived realities that are thinking differently. And I think if we open our mind to that, I think we can go way further than what we are doing now. Because it's not just about me, it's about the people, everyone else out there. And if we have I know our scores are like a very national, like high level score. We don't dig in to every single community or every single little corner. But at a national level, if we're saying nationally people think this is important, then what are we saying otherwise? So I think for that's been very powerful for us as well, in terms of we can say, yeah, you think this, but the rest of the country is thinking this. So,
And it also opens your eyes to what people other than you or what people who are not in your circle are thinking of.
Exactly, yeah.
It's reminding me of a book I once read. It was called Voices for Peace by Sarah Kabir.
Yeah.
And she had this introduction where she repeated again and again that she had these interviews with both sides. These are the people who were in the military, who fought in the war and represented the government of Sri Lanka, and the people who fought for the LTTE.
Yeah.
So in her introduction, she repeats how even within one side,
Yeah.
although there's two sides we're talking about, even within one side, she's like, there are multiple truths.
Exactly.
Like one person might be like, I don't know, they might say something, but another person within that same group might have a completely different experience, which is like completely in contrast or is the opposite of what the other guy was saying. And so she was like saying how in working in a post-war conflict or understanding how to move on from conflict, we have to give the space and the ability for everyone to understand that different truths can exist at the same time.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's very hard to get people to understand that different truths can exist at the same time, because they're like, how did this happen? But also, how did this happen?
Exactly. And that's a challenge I think any kind of context would have.
Okay.
Is one, and this other thing about sometimes you can maybe disagree, but then kind of accept it and then kind of go along, right? So sometimes it might be very hard for me to believe that, okay, this is what happened to me. How is it possible that something different happened to you? But I think it's the ability to say, okay, I accept your truth. Now let's try to find a common ground. I think that's what is the challenge, I think.
And I think when you spoke about the importance of truth, your 4 pillars, and you said truth is one, and how South Africa did it and how Sri Lanka has I think, done a little bit of it, but they've
Yeah.
not completed it,
Yeah.
or they've not done
Yeah,
the,
we
the
haven't
best.
scratched the surface, I think, there.
Okay.
Yeah. We
Okay.
tried in different ways, I think, but we haven't, like, I mean, even the CTUR, the Commission for Truth and Reconciliation, Truth, Unity and Reconciliation, even the fact that we put in a legislation for that is a good thing, I think.
Okay.
Again, it comes to now what's next, how are we going to implement it, but yeah.
And I think for people, like, at a broad level in this country, to be able to understand that multiple truths can exist even within one side, is you need that step of truth telling. Because when you
Exactly.
hear
You hear the
stories that
stories.
don't match yours and that is completely different to yours, is when you take the time to hear the other person first of all,
Exactly, yeah.
and then you're able to understand that, oh, okay, I had this really bad experience, but this other person in whose camp I belong to had something completely different.
Yeah.
So that's how
I think CSO, a lot of, like, there is, I can't remember exactly who, there was an example of a CSO working with mothers from the north and mothers from the south and bringing them together to share their stories. And there's a complete breakdown of even the mothers of the south say, okay, my son was in the army, your son was in the LTTE, but we both lost our sons, and that's a mother's grief, and that's a shared, that's a common ground they found. And they were able to kind of, come together despite them being from completely polar opposites, because they were able to hear the human side of that story. It's very hard also to think at a national level doing this. Like, I don't even know where we are going to start, but I think we need to, have some. And I think having the Commission for Truth, Unity, and Reconciliation is a big start. And I really hope that they don't also now forget this and, try to. I know the new government's been talking about a Truth and Forgiving Commission, and I mean, there's conversation about it, which is also good. It's healthy. It's not. We're not saying we don't need it. We're acknowledging that yes, maybe we do need it. So there's some hope, I guess.
okay, I'm just looking into the future and I'm thinking, how would we one day know that reconciliation has been achieved? Considering that, okay, now we have this tool called the Sri Lanka Barometer, just like South Africa has a tool called the South Africa Barometer. If this barometer and the mechanisms you guys employ in getting it to run continues for the next few decades, and we look at the results of it and things are moving in a positive direction, can we then say we've achieved reconciliation?
No, that's what I like. That's what I always say, that, when I started out in this area, especially before I got experience more, when I was like getting my knowledge from books. For me, it was that, okay, you can achieve it. It's a destination that we can go to and say, okay, now we're here.
Okay.
I don't know how we can stand somewhere and say, okay, now we have reconciliation. I think it's more about looking at, okay, now communities are coming together, or looking at these different things and saying, okay, now a Tamil person has as much opportunity as a singular person, or that we're all speaking Sinhala and Tamil, and we are able to understand each. So there are these so many different things, and maybe not in our lifetime, maybe somewhere in the future we might come to a point that, wow, we're a trilingual nation, everyone's speaking the same language, or everyone has the same opportunities, or I don't know, maybe there'll be at some point where we can say that
Okay.
we are here, but just being realistic, there might be other things that are then coming up that we have to also focus on. Maybe our focus won't be the war in, say, in 10, 15 years. Maybe it's something else. And then maybe that's a process of healing, or a process that we kind of have to start over. So it's really hard to say. I think that, we can go somewhere and say, okay, now the chapter's closed. I don't think, even countries like South Africa, 30 years after their process of, truth and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So I went there in April, actually, on a learning journey, and it was very eye-opening, because we look at South Africa as this amazing example of transitional justice and reconciliation. yes, they were very successful in some things like the healing and the forgiveness and ending this, systemic racism and all of that. But there's so much of poverty and inequality. It's like
Okay.
it's jarring. It's in your face. And we actually spoke to a lot of our colleagues there saying, so what do you think about this? Because one huge aspect of our Sri Lankan kind of context when we look at reconciliation is economic, we have economic indicators like lived poverty index, where we're saying how often are you deprived of your basic necessities in a year? And then we have a score to say our poverty levels are this in line with, other poverty indicators. So that's a huge part of reconciliation for us. And we ask them like, so isn't this now, like, can you say you've achieved reconciliation? And they're like, no, that's one thing that we didn't get right, is the economic aspect of it. They're still discussing in Parliament about reparations 30 years after.
Okay.
So for us, it's like, okay, we're not the only ones who are, like, you asked me that question 16 years later, like, are we in the right space? I mean, if South Africa is still talking about reparations, how do we go about this? That's something they didn't focus on 30 years ago. So now they're seeing the repercussions of it. So I think we have to be, it all goes back to being realistic, but also being humble enough to know that we're not going to get it right all the time. We're not going to get it right the first time. We have to keep working. We have to keep, building. We have to keep maybe going back and saying, this didn't work. Now let's try something else. It's okay. I think it's just a matter of moving the progress. I think what's important.
I'm also thinking about, the actual victims or the actual survivors who've lost sons and daughters or husbands and wives, who had to pay the price of losing their aunt.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about we can make mistakes and that's okay. I'm also thinking about like, if the state or CSOs keep going back to them and restarting the reconciliation process, do you think they would be unhappy about it? Do you think they would feel like they are being used? How do you also make sure that they are happy, genuinely happy, and that they support these mechanisms if, say the one that was done before wasn't so great and now we're going to try again?
I think already there's a lot of fatigue. I mean, there's been a lot of, we've heard this, there's been so many commissions of inquiry for so many things, and it's the same people that come forward. Now people are probably saying, I don't want to come forward. I came forward 5 years ago and nothing happened. So you're right, I'm sure there's this fatigue of, or this giving up or disillusionment of like, nothing's happening. Let's not, let's just forget about it, or but then there are people within those communities that are still driven, like the movement of the mothers of the disappeared movement. For years and years, they haven't stopped asking for the answers. So I think there are people in society who have the energy and the capacity or the drive to kind of keep doing it, whether it's taking multiple rounds of telling the same thing to the different people, but then there might be some who's like, just, I'm not, just leave me alone. It's like, don't get me involved in this. So I think we kind of balance it out as a community. But we have to keep in mind that victims, they went through real pain and they're real people who has far greater loss than maybe you and I can imagine.
Yeah.
And we have to that's the thing, as a government, you have to take it seriously. If you did consultations to set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, then do it. Like, don't now open a new commission to ask the same questions. I'm sure the consultation task force asked the same questions in 2017. I think that's when they did their consultations. Go read those reports. Like, I'm sure you'll learn so much that has not, maybe some things might have changed now, years later, but I think that's something we are not doing right. I think just doing things for the sake of doing it, or for like a tick box exercise that ends up, being detrimental, having real consequences. So I don't know. I'm hoping that, like, at least now I feel, I don't know, there's also time that people were fearful to come forward. There was a time that maybe a truth commission won't work in our country because people are like, I'm scared to speak up. I cannot tell my truth because I might face the repercussions of it. But maybe now it's not, I don't know. I hope that people feel now we can speak up and maybe it's the time to do it. So yeah, let's see. Yeah.
Okay. You were talking about ticking boxes, and I'm just thinking how I think different governments come in and they start the consultative process from scratch, and you have the victims and the survivors who are fatigued. And it's very rare to see a government use the work of a previous government, if that work was good,
Yeah.
use those recommendations and move forward from the next step rather than starting from scratch. And then I'm also thinking, by the time they start from scratch with the consultations, document all of that, make recommendations,
a lot
and
of
then
work.
years have passed and it's time probably for another government to come
Yeah,
in. So it just
and then
never,
again,
the recommendations just never end up taking place.
and forget about transitional justice or reconciliation. In general, we see this like policies are put in place and then they're not implemented, and then the priorities of the next government change, so then that policy is just tabled some, like, put away somewhere. So it's not just, we're talking about a very sensitive area, but even if we can't implement policies, like, I mean, an example is the language rights policy, right? It's a great policy on paper. It's amazing. Like, I did some work on it recently as well. I mean, if we can implement that, how amazing would it be? We would be far ahead. But I don't know where we are getting it wrong in the implementation of it. It's getting stalled, or we're not committed to it, or we're not investing in it. So I think, yeah, I mean, put aside TJ and reconciliation, but everything else, I think we need to, we need to get act together, I guess.
You mean, when you say the language rights and how that's not being implemented, do you mean you're not seeing enough of the Sinhala and Tamil being used on signboards in state bodies?
Not only that, I think now you see more of that. I think definitely you see the signage and things.
Okay.
But say you go to a district secretariat office,
Okay.
and you have no idea, you don't know Sinhala, you only know Tamil. They're supposed to have an officer in every office who has knowledge of that language. But I think even CPA had done some work on that as well, and Center for Equality and Justice was doing some work on that. But you go to that office and they don't know anyone.
Okay.
Like, they don't have anyone who speaks Tamil. So they're like, can you come back with someone who can translate for you? They don't even have a translator to help. Or there'll be, I think recently I did some interviews with midwives in Noor Elia, who are Tamil speaking. They understand Sinhala, but they don't know how to write Sinhala. But they are saying that they have to write even though the forms and all the documentation within the policy, you should be able to submit it in Tamil. That's okay. It's all, you can submit in English, Tamil, or Sinhala. It's fine.
Okay.
But they've been asked, you have to submit the documentation in Sinhala because we don't have anyone here who understands Tamil. So then we can't help you. We can't find a solution for you. It won't go to the next level of where it needs to go.
Yeah.
So they struggle, even the people who work in government. Tamil, we only think about the service receivers, but even service providers who work in government, they face, they struggle too, because still, whatever said and done, the language of administration is Sinhala. So, and then there is a requirement for every government office after 2007 to learn Tamil as well. That's part of a requirement when they take the job. They learn it, and even like they learn it, but it's not easy also after a certain age to pick up a language. I think that's a reality we need to accept as well. But some people genuinely learn it because they want to learn it, but some people just do it because I have to do it.
Okay.
But again, it's not, it may be in some places than others, it's implemented better, but it's not, consistently implemented throughout the country. So that's, one I can talk about because I've done like a lot of research on it as well. But there are so many, things like that has to be done, right, efficiently. And I think I'm not blaming the government, because I think it's also a matter of capacity, resources, and we are a developing country, we need the support for sure. So yeah, I'm just thinking like so much has to be done, I guess. Yeah.
I'm also thinking about some of the results you guys kind of sneaked out, I think, before the launch of the barometer results,
Yeah.
the survey results for 2025 on your social media. The Sri Lanka Barometer page had this post recently talking about how, over the years of you tracking the progress of the pulse of the people, or the perspective of the people of what they think is the barrier to reconciliation,
Yeah.
and something that was looking really high up there over the years and has gone up over the years, I noticed, was the ability to speak in the language of the other person.
Yeah.
They believe that that is a barrier to achieving reconciliation.
Yeah, so it's more, we have, so this one we posted is barrier to associating with someone from a different ethnic group. We do also have barrier to reconciliation, which is a different indicator.
Okay.
This one's barrier to associating with someone from a different ethnic group. And language has gone from, I think in 2020, it was about 20% or something or less, to now 50%. Half the population is saying
Yeah.
language is the biggest barrier for me to be able to talk to someone from a different ethnic group.
So I don't talk to someone from the other ethnicity of mine just because I don't know the
their
language. I
language.
can communicate with them, and this is happening on such a large
Yeah,
scale.
or I expect them to talk to me in my language, right? Like then you
Yeah.
find a way to communicate. But if you don't know the language, that's the biggest.
So I was thinking, for CSOs and NGOs and organizations working in the peace building space in Sri Lanka, that's a really good indicator to look at to decide where they want to put their efforts and their money into, if they're interested in providing, meaningful change.
We can go further, like we don't dig much deeper because obviously we also we have what 62 indicators. Like this time's report, we only picked 15 or 16 indicators depending on like focus area.
Okay.
But we can cut that in different ways. We can cut that answer of the 50% who said language is the biggest barrier for me to associating with someone from a different ethnic group. Who is saying that? Is it how many? Is it Sinhalese? Is it Tamils? Is it people from the north? Is it people from the rural sector? Is it men, women? Is it young people? Like we can cut it in so many ways. We just don't because we also have a certain limit of what we can do. But we encourage, now we have our data sets accessible. We encourage people who work with quantitative data, please take that data, cut it anyway. Take one indicator, you can cut it so many ways and come up with so many different insights. So yeah.
So you're saying that this year, the 2025 results of the survey have only 15 indicators tracked
No,
and not the 60?
No, we have tracked 62.
Okay.
Like that's there. We have the data for it.
Okay.
It's all analyzed and everything. We just, because we do a report every 2 years as well, this time we took 15 indicators that are relevant to governance, accountable governance, civic engagement, and then overall like core indicators.
Okay. But the data is there.
The data is there.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'd like to move into your personal insights or your personal thoughts, because you've worked for more than 10 years in the development sector. Where do you think Sri Lanka's development sector is doing a good job? Like a decent job is happening in a particular area. And also, where do you think we're really not doing a good job? Like we could pay more quality attention to this certain area. We're not really doing a good job here.
Okay, let me start with the good part, I guess. I think over the years, globally as well, but Sri Lanka as well, has moved away from the development aid mindset where an international organization will come and give you aid or money or whatever and then go away, right? Their job is done and they go away. I think we've really evolved into now the development organizations are funding or giving technical resources or building capacity of the structures that are already there. And I think that is something the development sector is doing really well now, is they're working, let's say we take a big international organization, they're working with civil society organizations, community, they go to the community, CBO level, community-based organization level. They work with grassroots, youth movements, like they're working with the structures or the movements or the organizations that are already there to say, okay, you know the people, you've been working with them, what is it that they need? And then we will work with you to achieve that.
Okay.
So I think that's one thing I've noticed. Like I do a lot of like monitoring and evaluation of development projects as well. And that's one thing I've noticed is that we don't want to duplicate. We want to work with the structures that are already there. There are some really great projects working with women for, women in who have small businesses, and helping them, giving them the training, not only the capital or the resources they need, but also the training and the skills development and all of that. So I think there's a lot of great examples like that that don't get highlighted too much. I think that's one. And the other thing is, what I've noticed also is that the government, like the development sector, supports the government.
Okay.
They understand there are certain things the government doesn't have the capacity to do. So for an example, that I won't name organizations, but for an example, they would send one of their staff who've been trained by them, or who have technical expertise, thus second them to the government. So they will work as an employee with the government in that particular ministry or agency, and kind of help in the particular area they need help.
Okay.
So they will talk to the government and say, what do you need help in? What are your areas you need to improve on? Let's work together. And there's a lot of policy making done now in collaboration with development organizations and experts. So there is a lot of commitments also. I think the government has made to specific international mechanisms or international legislation, things that then they know they need the assistance from the development sector, so they do accept it, and they're like, yes, come sit with us, let's work together.
Okay.
So I found that to be it's great to see that happening. That I think in any context we don't need the government and the development sector pitting against each other. We need them to work together, and that's where we can see progress, right?
So you're saying something you think that's going well in the development sector is, number one, there's less reliance on these international organizations, and that the international organizations are working with the local organizations.
Yeah, I mean, there's still, I won't say there's less reliance. There's still some reliance in terms of the resources and things.
Yeah.
But there's a process where you can now leave, say a project is over, and that organization would end that project, but they have put structures in place for it to continue. Sometimes it is not as successful. I think there's still a dependency culture. That's another thing I was going to, I think, talk about in terms of what's not going well. So there's two sides to it. There's one is that, yes, we are working with existing structures, and there are instances where these structures have been strengthened and they carry on. But there are times that maybe it ends there because they still do need some hand-holding. I don't know. Or there's still a dependency on, we need foreign funds, or, we can't do it without foreign funds. And that's something we're facing now, especially after the US has pulled out their funding. We've noticed how the competition is so much higher to get the same pot of funds, right? So I think I won't say that we're not doing it right. It's more about, it's a challenge we're facing now in the development sector is we have to balance the priorities and the needs of the people, the communities that we're working with, but we also have to kind of balance the priorities of these big international organizations and what are they giving funds for now? What is their focus area? Are they moving on from post-war justice? Are they moving towards economic aspects, economic development? And then we have to find a balance there, because we also all, we need the funds to continue the work we do. And I think that's where it's becoming very difficult now, I think, in terms of balancing the priorities of the needs of the people versus what is the priorities of these organizations now.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's I guess, two sides to it.
But didn't you also say, like, in your second point of where do you think we're performing well in this in the development sector, you said that, like, your second point was that you feel like the development organizations are working with the government, like they're sending someone into these government departments and they're getting the information of where support is required and they're giving support there. So considering that, like, first of all, my question is, has USAID's resources that we used to get from USAID, has it completely stalled? Like, from whatever they were giving us, is it now zero, or is there something?
I think I'm not really I'm not sure too much about, like, I think a lot of, I don't know, maybe projects that were continuing, maybe they have the funds to continue until when they were supposed to stop. But I heard, I think I think it was Women in Need, and like there's a lot of shelters that had to shut down because now they don't have funds. So maybe there was a point, some projects were like, okay, stop what you're doing now, and no more funding is coming past this. But if it was, I don't know, I'm not sure of the details, but I know definitely a lot of government, like, CSOs or a lot of community-based organizations who are relying on these funds for things like women's shelters or I don't know, giving bags, they give like goods bags to people in a lot of poverty. Or I think those things just probably just stopped overnight, I think. So I'm not saying they're the only funders, but they were a big funder, right?
Yeah.
So there is now you see other countries picking the pace up a bit as well. But yeah, it's just balancing. I think in one hand, like we see organizations like the UN is doing a very good job with working very closely with the government. And I mean, that's part of their mandate also, is to work with the governments, the bilateral sort of agreements, right?
Okay.
So that's where I said I think it kind of works well because you're working very closely with the governments. But then if you're looking at projects or community projects or, I mean, even for us, in Sri Lanka Barometer, we have to continue, and we have to look for funds, and it's not something like doing a large scale survey like this. It costs a lot. It takes a lot of resources. I mean, definitely we need the data, we need all of that, but like it hasn't been done before because it takes a lot of resources to do a national level survey and be able to look at all these numbers and indicators and analyze. So I think there's so many places where it's going to get much difficult now we have to start being creative. I think we have to start moving away from that mentality of like the donor mentality to how are we going to sustain ourselves, I think. I think that's so important to start thinking about, I think.
And right there, you're right in the middle of that task,
Yeah.
with the Insights
Yeah.
Initiative. Would you like to talk about the Insights
Yeah, I
Initiative?
mean, definitely came from a place where a need to continue the Sri Lanka Barometer.
Why
So
is the Sri
currently,
Lanka Barometer terminating?
so currently it's implemented by a GIZ program called SCOPE, Strengthening Social Cohesion and Peace in Sri Lanka, which is funded by EU and Germany.
Okay.
They have, I think, since the start of Sri Lanka Barometer, been funded by EU and Germany. And now that program's ending.
Okay.
So their term ends, and then anyway, from the beginning, one of the kind of aims or like the goals of the program was to institutionalize Sri Lanka Barometer in a local organization.
Okay.
Because they understand that this is not sustainable. When the funding ends here, they move on to a different program. Maybe that'll take forward SLB, maybe not. But now that since 2018, we've had time to build I learned a lot on the job, and now I know the SLB like the back of my hand because they kind of built the capacity and built the expertise. And obviously we worked with South Africa, Institute for Justice and Reconciliation in South Africa. They were like the technical experts. But now we have to take it forward. And I think we looked around for existing organizations to do this, and we just couldn't find an organization that had the capacity for it, or to prioritize it rather, and the other is the passion for it. And I think, like, having worked on it, I felt like I'm not ready to let it go. Like, it's now like a part of the work, like the biggest thing I do now, and something I'm very passionate and I believe in, that I know this can make a big difference. And it's very hard to find that if you haven't been working on it already for so many years, to just hand it over to an organization that may not know anything about it, that may not stay true to the methodology, the integrity of this is the voice of the people, and we have to kind of honor that, right? We can't play around with the numbers. And so those things, I think, then we decided we can't find anyone. Why don't we just start our own organization? So a few of us who are already working on Sri Lanka Barometer, we kind of been talking about it for about 1.5 years now.
Okay.
And finally we're like, okay, let's do it. And we got a lot of support from GIZ to kind of set it up and do all of that. So we still feel like, they're not going to abandon us. So there is some sort of comfort. But it's still a lot. Now it's our thing. It's not a donor-funded bilateral organization doing it. It's a local organization with relatively young professionals taking it forward, I guess.
There's also some beauty to it, I feel.
I guess, yeah.
Because like the donor organization kind of nurtured you guys, locals in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
Sri Lankans,
Yeah.
to set this up,
Yeah.
work on it, get all the expertise and the
Yeah.
knowledge,
Yeah.
and now they're giving it to you for you to run.
To run it.
So
And I think that's great.
it's
And I think that's, again, something, the example I gave, I think of how what's working well, I think, in the development sector. But also the Insights Initiative won't only do, that will be our flagship project, which is the Sri Lanka Barometer.
Yes.
But we do want to do like other kind of work where we are able to amplify the voices of different communities that may not be heard usually. So through research and data. Yeah.
So good luck with that.
Thank
And
you.
I wish the
Thank you so
Insights Initiative all the very best, especially with your flagship project, because you've done that, the barometer, and you've produced the results of the barometer for quite a few years now. And to see that not continue would be a shame,
yeah,
you know.
for
So
sure.
I really wish you all the luck in getting the support and the funding and the resources and the capacity to take the barometer forward for decades into the future.
Thank you
So
so
that we'll have this robust repository of the pulse of the people, you know?
Yes.
So good luck with that.
Thank
Let me know
you.
if you need anything at all.
Of
Thank you so much
course.
for
And I think we've built a good network around us, people like you, that, we don't want it to be like it's just us doing it. We want it to be like a network of people who work together on it. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming here
Thank
today.
you.
Such a
Good.
pleasure to
It was
have
such a good conversation.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Natasha. I really, really enjoyed
It
this.
was so good. Look at the time. I didn't even realize it. Wow.
It's 5:47. That's about it, everyone. I had a brilliant time talking to Natasha. I can't wait to see what great work she continues to do. Until next time with my next guest, thank you so very much for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'll see you soon.